So the session we're about to go into is about public safety and using GIS in emergency management and respondents information, and responders. So as we go through this, we're going to be having Shane Heater kind of lead this, and I'm just going to be his puppet here, clicking on things when he tells me to. And Shane built the map that we're going to be looking at here, not only as a firefighter and responder, but also as a part-time employee of WTH. He does some work for us up on northern Indiana, doing a lot of work with agencies up there for training and so on. He has taken using GIS and public safety to new levels, and you're going to see a lot of that here. When we did this at the Indiana Users Conference, there was a lot of Q&A with the audience, and I imagine he's going to be showing some stuff that's going to bring some questions up for you guys. And yet, when you have those, go ahead and you can send those through on the chat. Make sure that you send them to the host. That'll be Eric Lowry. He'll be able to get those, and then he can pass them along as we move through this. If you accidentally send them to me or to Shane, that's not a huge problem. Just will be easier if Eric's able to filter those, and we can keep the presentation moving that way. So, Shane, you're on with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right. So tell us what we're looking at here.
So right here is the map that we use at the Goshen Fire Department. You can see, you know, it's kind of the newer style, has the brighter background than the traditional black. We use a lot of, in emergency services and public safety, we have to have quick access to things, and that's what this map is designed to do. So you'll notice up top we have some quick access buttons, some links along the top menu bar that gives us the ability to, I've basically figured out over the years that 1 or 2 clicks is about all we can handle as we're driving down the road. So the whole map is kind of designed to be functional for a firefighter.
So what are these buttons set up for? What are we looking at on these buttons?
So the right there, what you're hovering over, that is to be able to search our pre-plan layer. We have an extensive pre-plan. We've been doing pre-plans for, 15 plus years. And when I came onto the department, we used to keep them in a huge folder, basically, in the fire trucks. Well, the access to get that was, you just couldn't look up through, 1,500 papers trying to access that information. So I took that information, made a layer in ThinkGIS, and then we inserted all that info in there. So now it's quick and easy. When we type in an address, that information automatically pops up. But that button up top gives us the ability to search, and if we know just the business name, we could type by that. We could also see how many pre-plans each shift has done this year just by using that custom button up top.
So just for you guys watching at home's information, the way that this is set up is if I were to go into the index and choose that pre-plans layer, there we go, Goshen pre-plans, and hit the search button, it's the exact same as if I just go click on this button right here. And that is set up in your menu. So if I go to my setup, workstation settings, menu, I can see, oh no, this one's set up in the layer, isn't it? I'm sorry.
Yep.
I forgot that. I think I did that at the Indiana conference too. I'll show you guys that in just a moment, how that's set up. That's actually tied into the layer itself. But we can get to that in just a minute. But by clicking on this, like Shane said, now I can go in and query by just about anything. And then if I hit the drop down, it's going to give me all of the information that's been entered in this layer for that field. So I can select any one of these, do the search, pop up, and when I locate, it takes me right to that and gives me that information over here. And now he's set this up with those tabbed forms, just like I showed you guys in the last session how to make. So it helps to manage great amounts of data. I think you saw when I clicked on that button, these are all of the fields that we're dealing with. I'm not even sure how many total there are.
I think it's 153.
Okay. So that's a lot of data to troll through and try and find meaningful information. But if I know all I need right now are the contacts, I can just click on that contacts tab, and there's the information I need. I'm not having to, pull through 153 fields of data trying to find a single one. So this is one area where those tab forms are very, very useful.
Yeah, and then we also have that set up so if you actually type in an address of a business that has been pre-planned, it will automatically display in that left-hand pane. So basically, guys don't even have to hit that button. We use that button up top more for like searching to see how many we've got complete, since January 1st of 2018.
So if I do this 1925 Lincoln Way East Goshen, it finds that address, and then over here on the information window, I'm going to see anything that has been defined within this map to be looked up automatically. So the parcel information, and then there's that pre-plan. So like Shane was saying, now they don't have to go in and look for this information or click on this to get the main information on this. They can just have it pulled up here and then be able to go click out here and pull up floor plan information and so on off of that layer.
And that was a good way to get buy-in. I get that question all the time from other firefighters and other public safeties. How do you get guys to use the map? And this was a good example. I kind of polled everybody on the department. I said, what information would you want right away? When you're responding to a call, what information is beneficial immediately? And that's what they came up with on the left-hand pane. So automatically they had some buy-in because they felt like they had made a difference. They made a decision, and it helped to progress the department to using the map and using it for the most part on every call.
And as you notice probably, if I click on that, oh, that's not where I can click on it, is it? Let me go look that one up again real fast. Search. Okay, we'll do that one again. So over here on Midwest Printing, it's showing everything when I look at that actual pre-planned feature itself. However, if I go to the address at 2331, 1 Eisenhower, oh, it didn't grab it at all. Way to go, Shane.
Oh, man.
It's off. There it is. It's off a little bit.
We recently had the addresses updated, so you had to pick the one that was off.
That's the one that I went with. Well, I'll go ahead and grab Menards again. So let's do that one. 1925. What was it? Lincoln Way.
Lincoln Way
East. So the reason this shows up differently than it doesn't have all of those fields of information is in the setup. So when I go to setup map settings, this auto area search option down here, and if I go choose the pre-plans, this one's the one that's set up and what we're using to define what shows over here, and modify, you can see those are the fields that were selected when Shane set this up. And some of them have been highlighted in red so that they stand out from the others. Basically every other one here has been turned red just so it's easier to look at and know this is the name of the business, this is the phone number I've got to call and ask for Jay. That can be altered just by simply clicking or checking any of these other fields, unchecking ones you don't want to see. You can highlight and change field colors and so on in here. The setup for this is, we've gone over it at other conferences, but I just wanted to go over it very quickly again to kind of give you an idea of how Shane was able to set this up to work the way it does. So what about these other buttons? What else we got going on up here?
Yeah,
Shane?
so the two green G's there, so we have a facility in Goshen called Greencroft. It's a senior living center, assisted living center. And the Greencroft is directly across the street from one of our stations. The doors button came about because we don't have much time to respond. And the one manor directly across from our station has 37 different doors. And that would be Manor 4 down there, if you want to hit that, Dylan.
Sure.
And if you kind of look at the layout of this building, you can imagine in an emergency situation, if you pick the wrong door number, you have a long ways to walk. I've actually heard stories of guys losing their ambulance because they walked in the door and then had to go to the other side and couldn't figure out where they parked their ambulance. So what this was a quick access to be able to figure out, and if across the street, like I said, is the fire station, this actually has 3 different routes to travel. So depending on which door number you need to go to, you can either go east down College Avenue, west down College Avenue, or straight across the street into a parking lot. So we needed a way to be able to quickly get that room or that door number to access whichever room is available and whichever room we get dispatched to. So it was really a hugely beneficial for that station because they have no time. I mean, their response time is literally probably 30 seconds to this facility. So this is a great way for them to be able to locate, know where to go, so they can make quick access to the patient.
Then conversely, I've got rooms that I can look up as well. So I could say room 104 in Manor 4 and locate. And as a responder, I can look at that and say, all right, my best doors are 18, 17, and 10, probably 18 down here.
Yep.
Would be my best route to get in and do that.
And then it actually, if you look in the left-hand information window, it actually tells you the nearest door is 18. Now, it just goes off. It may not necessarily be the easiest one to access. It's just the closest one to that room.
Yeah, so that's defined in the field itself. Just to kind of show you guys how that's set up. Let me go in on my pre-plans here. I'm going to right-click and go to that layer format. And, oh gosh, wrong layer, Dylan. Jeez. Greencroft, room numbers, there we go. This nearest door is set up to use a nearest feature field type. What that means is it's going to look on the layer Greencroft door, and whichever one is nearest, and this is based on as the crow flies. So like Shane was saying, it might not actually be the best door to route you to that room, because it could be that going through door 18 here brings you to a locked ward that you don't have access to from here. So 17 would actually be the best one. It's just for a reference though, and it is as the crow flies for that. And you can define a specific number of fields to come in from a specific layer and display over here for nearest feature. There's a couple different ways to manage that.
And that room numbers, we used to just have the door number field up there, the button. And we actually had a huge changeover in dispatchers, like everybody. It's hard to keep dispatchers and good dispatchers. And they stopped giving us the room number. They stopped giving us, or they would just stop giving us door numbers. They would only give us the room. And it was hard to look up and figure out where to go. So the guys asked if I could do this. And, yeah, with a little bit of time and a little bit of, time putting the room numbers on there, it was able to quickly make access for them to grab the room number and the door number all together.
So overall, this setup for you has worked well enough that you've expanded it, obviously, to some other things. Like here, the Goshen College is broken out by the different buildings.
Correct.
Search on that and locating will pull that up for me and so on.
The problem with Goshen College is, if you look at all basically the red there in the center of the screen, except for the church and the rec center, I believe, every address in there is the same. It's all 1700 South Main. And I love when they do that for these huge complexes. So it made it hard for us to figure out which manor we were going to. So now we can just go up, hit the GC button, you know, flip down to whatever manor we're going to. That one's Kratz Hall. And then it automatically highlights it on the map, and we know where to go. So
I imagine routing, once you get into a college like this, getting to the correct building becomes kind of a chore too without having some kind of guide.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we get in there enough. We get in there enough. I've never seen so many college kids burn so much popcorn in a microwave. But over the years, yeah, it's not a big enough college that it's so huge we can't figure out where to route. I mean, guys that have been on for a while, you get in there enough, we know. So, But it definitely is. We definitely go to certain halls more than, you know, we go to like the senior hall, the senior apartments more than we do like the actual education buildings.
Yeah. Well, that's where the alcohol poisoning happens.
Exactly.
So. And so this just goes so on. And for you guys watching, you know, stuff like this is just so quick and easy to do once you get the points out there. You know, and obviously it's easy for me to sit here and say it's so easy to get this stuff done. Obviously, you've got to have the data and get the data on the map in the correct location. But once it's there, it's just a matter of keeping it up to date and then adding these kinds of this kind of information. Now, as I said, these are set up within the layer. These buttons are set up within the layers. If I go to the layer format here, no, I'm doing the wrong one. Geez, Dylan. Let me show my map editing tools and grab it. Where are my keystone plan? There we go. All right. So when you set up layers, I'm trying to remember where that one is, Shane. I get to it so little. Where is that set up for the button, Shane?
The button, it's actually in the layers. If you go back to the layers.
In the layer settings? Okay.
Yeah, if you go over to the right, you'll find the button.
That's right. There we go. Button, there we go, custom buttons. It's in the layer settings on this. I'm going to pretend like I thought of that. In the layer settings. If I click on this, you can see it brings up, if I do it on any other layer, they're all blanked, of course, but here on the keystone plants, when I click on it, I get the option of being able to go in and set up a button to actually do something for me. This search form command basically opens up the search from the index for a specific layer. So I just have to put search form with no space here, and then the layer name as it shows in the layer settings. And it will add that button to the top of my screen whenever that layer is added to the map, and then behave just as we were showing, right? I'll be able to click on it and then search that. In this case, Shane's gotten actually an image to put in as an icon for this. So he's got the actual icon for that business displayed as the button type up here. Those can be added as well through this main menu, or not map settings, excuse me, workstation settings here. On the menu tab, I can add buttons as well. Let me just do a custom button. There we go. And it's the same setup. I can go in, pick an icon, upload an icon image that I've chosen, and then the command being the search form and so on. The difference is, with the workstation settings, I'm only setting that button up on this particular computer. If I want anybody else to get that same button, I've got to go and do it individually on each one. Because Shane has set these up within the layer itself, here in the layer settings, that travels with the layer then. So when I synchronize this and it gets uploaded to sync, other people download and add it, that button's going to automatically appear at the top of their map screen. So they'll have these search buttons across here without having to do any extra work on theirs or any other computers. Very, very cool. And a great way to make sure that all the pertinent people are getting all the information they need and all the tools they need to be able to effectively do that job. Also, really in a more practical level, it's a lot easier for the person managing all this, in this case Shane, to get that information out without having to touch every machine.
Most definitely. Most definitely.
So overall, when we're talking about using layers like this in response, you know, you already mentioned you're in a truck, you're bouncing down a road, you're trying to find out as much information as you can as you're traveling. What have you found over the years to be most beneficial on a map as a responder for you? And I know a lot of this goes to what you've been talking to the other guys in your department about, but go ahead and just talk a little bit about that for us.
Yeah, just, you know, a lot of it, the area photography is huge, just knowing where you're going. I bring this up all the time, you know, just typing in an address and being able to tell that it's the third driveway past a certain road, you know, in the middle of the night. You know, we used to shine spotlights because everybody marks their mailboxes. I mean, let me tell you, everybody has their address clearly written on their mailbox. It's just hard to find addresses sometimes. So just the mere ability to pull up to the third driveway and back in, you know, we're in a customer service business, whether or not people want to think of it that way, but We are. So, you know, if we drive past their residence, it doesn't look good. So being able to pull right up to the residence back into their driveway like we know what we're doing is great. I mean, it's huge. It makes us look better. It gives them, you know, a better image of our fire department because we're rolling around in a rolling billboard, really.
Right.
So, you know, that's huge. As far as response to the pre-plans is great. Being able to just having a little bit of the layout of the building before we go into it just can help us so much in tactics and knowing about the building, knowing where, you know, the Knox box is. That's basically, if you don't know what a Knox box is, that's where they keep the keys to the factory, to the business. So it's a locked box that only the local fire department has a key to. We can access that. We can make quick access without having to cause damage to doors or windows. Mm-hmm. So the floor plans are great, huge. Another big one's fire hydrants. Yep. If you look on the screen here and if you zoom in a little closer, we've kind of gone a step further. So, and this is all out of basically air. We had a fire years ago where one truck was hooked to a fire hydrant. We tried to hook to another fire hydrant that was the next closest one, and we were basically robbing Peter to pay Paul. We were hooked into the same line system, and we didn't have enough water. So what we did is we've always had the fire hydrants on here, but we went over to the engineering department, asked them if they had the water lines mapped out, and of course we have a great engineering department. They're very proactive in GIS, and they're like, yeah, we have a layer already made. So we pulled that layer from them, and if you notice up in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, it has a color code here. So what we've done is I put all the water lines in there, and then I classified them by their size. So we got, I believe, it's hard to read, 6, 8, and 12 inch.
Yep.
So 6, 8, and 12 inch. So I know there, if I have a huge fire at Menards, which is, you know, a huge building, I would probably be better off hitting this hydrant along Lincoln Way, the green line hydrant, because I'm going to get basically double the water of the other facility or the other hydrants around the building. So taking a little bit of time in the beginning and understanding that may make the whole scene run better than hooking to the closest hydrant. That might be more convenient. However, you know, we might be running out of water very quickly off a 6-inch water main.
Yep.
So that has been huge. And like I said, I encourage you, depending on which community you live in, some of that stuff's probably already out there. You just need to think about it, and you need to make the proper contacts with the proper people, and we can dump that into your map and make it a more useful map for you.
Absolutely. I'm going to go up to the index here for a moment, and I just want you guys to kind of see what we're talking about when we're talking about information getting pulled in. Now, Shane is unique in that he's able to not only find the time to be able to supplement this information and keep it maintained, but he's also savvy enough. He's used the map a lot. He really knows what he's doing once he gets in there. And that really just comes from the repeated use of it, of course. That's how everybody learns anything, is simply by doing it over and over enough. On your fire department's layers down here, I keep closing that. I don't mean to. I'm assuming that's coming from your end and not mine, Shane.
That's affirmative.
As we move through this, you guys can see some of these. Whenever I'm looking at information in a GIS, if I see this object ID field, I'm absolutely 100% certain this came from a shape file, some kind of ESRI file. This is something that ESRI does with every layer. They automatically put in an object ID, and it's just basically a unique number to keep each feature independent from the others. So if we had 2 in here for Goshen High School, they would have 2 different object ID numbers on there to define them. So that tells me that this was a shape file that Shane acquired and brought in. Same here, if I'm looking at this, this actually tells me shape length, shape area, These are another thing that shapefiles do. They'll add that for every feature in a layer, and it's calculated on the map length and area. It's nothing to do with anything actually indicating what real world size of that feature is. What is some information that you haven't added yet that you'd like to get in here?
So I actually just recently got done with a photovoltaic for firefighters having solar panels. I've heard, and it's hard to believe, but per capita, Elkhart County in Indiana, or in Goshen area, has more solar panels per capita than like San Antonio and Los Angeles. I find that hard to believe, but it's huge. Even our high school now is leasing their roof space for solar panels, which brings them extra income, but solar panels for firefighters can never really be turned off. Even our emergency lights at night can activate and charge them along with the moon and everything else. So that is something I just got done implementing in the map, and unfortunately it's not in this map yet. I
thought I had it on here. I'm going to grab it real fast, actually.
Okay.
I thought I had it. I apologize for that.
So that is something new that just came about. Basically, we knew it's been there. It's just trying to figure out a way to implement it in the map, just like everything else, to make it useful for our guys. So we recently just did that and got that completed. And then the most current one that I'm working on is they actually just passed a bill in Senate, the Indiana State Senate this year, that you have to notify firefighters when you build a lightweight construction house. So we are now being notified via a form, an electronic form, that tells us the address and a little bit about the buildings when they're built, that they include or have lightweight construction in there, which affects us because lightweight construction is nothing like the old legacy construction, and it doesn't last as long when it's under fire. It's basically all glued board and OSB. So that's a huge benefit to us to know when something is built that way.
All right, I've got that layer in there now too to kind of give us a little bit more info on that. So looks like this is a residential one.
Yeah, and we have a lot of, so it's hard to see because you clicked on it, but it has a PV symbol. That's what I chose for the map. And mostly for the fire department, yes, you can click on it and you can get more details about how big the system is. But really, the big thing for us as firefighters is just knowing that one is present. We don't necessarily need too much of the other information. So when I sat down to work on this project, I had to figure out how to implement it in. And actually, this was a really simple project because this all came from a spreadsheet that they already had. And I just basically imported it right into ThinkGIS.
Very cool. Let's choose a church here and kind of give you guys a better idea. So, like churches, as we know, generally are just full of nothing but wood and oxygen. So when a fire breaks out, first off, it's never very good. But I'm sure dealing with something like this, and I think you mentioned this just a minute ago, but thinking about that, it changes the game if they're using the solar panel to supply power to the residents or to the business, because cutting power now isn't sufficient.
Exactly.
Because they're pulling it from somewhere else, which can be very, very dangerous if you're suddenly cutting through a roof and hit a line that's live. That can be pretty bad for everybody involved.
Yeah, most definitely. And there's basically two types of systems. They're piping it back into the electric grid and getting paid for it, or they're trying to supply their house and offset some of their costs. So it is something probably need to look at in the future, whether or not it's even tied into the grid, because if it's tied into the grid, you're not shutting it off, period.
Right. Then going back in here a little bit, On the stuff that you have that you've already put into this layer, what is the stuff, aside from we've talked about the solar panels and things, what is the stuff that you're wanting to enhance or grow that you just haven't had the time to do yet of what you've already got on here?
Oh, yeah, that's never ending. I usually every year I do an annual training with our fire department, and I ask them for a wish list, and a wish list or the crazy idea list. And I've had a little bit of everything. I've had somebody wanted me to get with the railroad and ask if they could be notified when a railroad crossing was blocked. And I'm sure that technology's out there, but they're never going to let that up for safety reasons. So, but I get crazy ideas like that that come about. Currently, right offhand, except for the doing the lightweight construction, I really have no other projects currently that I'm kind of on board with or waiting on. Just kind of maintaining, as you imagine, the pre-plan layer has, I believe, almost 900 entries in there, and we're constantly going out and updating. So I have a hard enough time keeping up with that sometimes.
Sure. Now, not to go on too much of a tangent, and Eric, if I'm talking out of school, chime in and tell me to shut up. I know we have talked with a company that is trying to track train progress. Of course, like you say, train companies aren't saying, yeah, go ahead and put a GPS on us and follow us everywhere we go.
Sure.
So what they're doing is setting up sensors at crossings, and basically it's trying to use some predictive technology to say, all right, the train crossed at, well, let me just back out here and look at some tracks. I'm sure you guys have a lot up there on the north end.
Yeah, we have, I think the Elkhart Rail Yard's like the 5th largest in the country.
Yeah.
So we have 140 trains or something a day coming through Goshen.
Speaking of, there it is. So it would then use some predictive technology to say, well, the train just crossed here, and it was traveling at this rate of speed, therefore it's going to be crossing here in about 3 minutes. However, if the train stops here, obviously that's not the greatest way to do it in the world, but it does help a little bit just to give some idea of what activity is going on. Trains
it
are
would be really cool if it would be really cool if it worked that way, wouldn't it?
Like I said, we're just in a theory period now.
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, I can give you some background on that because it is an interesting thing. And the rail companies themselves are not doing this. There is an engineering firm that works with railroads specifically, and they're the ones that are developing this technology. If you could get the information directly from the railroad, as Shane was describing, then you'd have much more accurate information, much more consistent information. But in this case, they're doing what Dylan has said. They're placing sensors, which are basically radar detectors, if you will, and they're locating them along a stretch of track. Many times they're at crossings or intersections. Other times they're in between to supplement the information. And they're attempting to create a system whereby these sensors would recognize when a train is coming, be able to gauge through the radar detector its speed and determine the direction of travel, et cetera. And those sensors, they're sending data from the sensors to a web service that we're able to consume. So we're working on the process with them of fine-tuning the sensor placements and the sensor sensitivity settings so that when we get information to display on the map, we're fairly confident that, in fact, that's the case. Just for an example, the sensitivity issue comes into play. When you place a sensor near a rail crossing and it is looking at the railroad tracks, if you have a street that happens to be running near the railroad tracks, perhaps on the other side, either parallel or perpendicular to the tracks, that sensor sensitivity has to be adjusted so that you don't get false positives every time a car goes down the road that's not a train car. So anyway, just to give you a little bit of that it's a pretty complex process. But at the stage we're in and being able to display things on the map, it is promising. And if this engineering firm is able to fine-tune this process in such a way that they know how to deploy sensors appropriately, then there's an opportunity for us to be able to do some really neat things with ThinkGIS for communities that have a lot of rail traffic and be able to display the information that you're describing. When is a train on a particular track? When is a gate closed? We don't get the actual gate signal, but if a train is crossing it, then we can notify when a train is actually blocking a particular crossing. Anyway, looks pretty interesting. So if that actually pans out into a successful project, I'm sure folks will be hearing more about it.
I know it's an ongoing issue in Indianapolis alone. They've increased traffic. CSX has increased traffic through Indianapolis, and it's not like oh, there's going to be a few more trains. It's a lot more traffic, and they manage to come through usually at rush hour or at lunch times, things like that, when it's critical times for just regular traffic patterns to be flowing smoothly. We've had, it's actually, train crossings have become Facebook notifications. They've actually added them as locations on Facebook that people can check into, so they can notify folks, yep, the train has stopped here and we're all stuck at it. So it is becoming an increasing issue, and for public safety especially. Go ahead and turn those off. So when we are, there we go. I want to go back a little bit and talk about then responders using this. When you're training your response team on this, I'm sure you're exclusively dealing with firefighters. Have you seen any of this usage branch out into other responders like the police and so on?
Oh, most definitely. Yeah, the Goshen Police Department has this in every vehicle. We've actually worked with them on some joint projects. We share this information with them. What we found is, like on the pre-plans, because we're going out and frequently visiting them on the pre-plans, our contact information is more current than what dispatch has on record, because every business calls, every time they have a manager or supervisor leave, they call dispatch and remind them. It's something they don't think about. So
sure.
They use that information. They've used the floor plan when they've had people break into a business to be able to go in and access and get these, criminals out of the business. And here, you talked earlier about having like a wish list. Probably the most, I guess the recent project that we're probably going to be working on is we recently performed an active killer drill at our Goshen at our Goshen Middle School, and in coordination with the police department, and they use IP cameras. The middle school does. Mm-hmm. So, and I know we've done that with other districts and other people that use our map. So, eventually, I would like to work with the Goshen Community Schools and maybe get access to those IP cameras that could help us out in if there ever was an active killer situation.
We've got that set up, I know, in a couple of counties. It's very difficult. Anyone who has worked with a school system knows exactly how locked down they are, and for good reason. There's a lot of information you need to protect kids from, and there's also just a lot of stuff out there, viruses and whatnot, that can just cause havoc, especially in something as tightly knit as a school corporation that has a lot of critical information about students, their addresses, medical needs, and so on, a lot of private information that needs to be hidden. So the IT departments at those are generally pretty savvy and generally have everything really locked down. And in those situations, it's usually an exclusive access for very specific machines. Usually a dispatch has access to those cameras through a VPN. Most of the time, they've got a separate management system for them. If they don't, then we can just drop a point on the map that opens up that specific camera. But those with those separate management systems, I haven't run into one yet that allows me to define which camera to open up in that management system. I simply have to put a point out there that opens that separate manager, and then the dispatcher can choose the correct camera they want to look at. So yeah, like you say, that when it's out there, it's something that can be done. It's just a matter of how many loopholes you have to jump through to get it to happen. And most of the time, they're technical more than political in those situations.
Exactly. I would say we have a pretty good in right now. If you've never done an active killer drill at a school, you really open up people's eyes.
I'm sure.
So right now would be the time to do it if we are ever going to pursue it, because it opened a lot of the school system's eyes on what could and could happen in the future. So
sure. So you mentioned the floor plans and how helpful they are, and I wanted to talk a little bit about those. First off, how are you getting all these floor plans?
Basically, what we do is we go out to the businesses when we perform the pre-plans, and we just ask them if they have a map available. And most of them at least have an evacuation map, something that they have posted on the wall. Some of them even have, contacts with the engineering department that actually drew up the original drawings, the floor plans. We also work closely with our inspection department, and they get all basically remodels and floor plans for all that, and I'll take those and dump them into the map also, so we have access. That one's a hand-drawn one, so the guys asked for a floor plan. There wasn't one there, so they just went back, and I believe that's drawn in Word.
Okay.
So nothing fancy there.
Do I need to know what the pain booth is?
The pain booth, probably, yeah. Why do you keep? You like to find all the errors, don't you?
I don't know. I thought it might be a very niche business. I don't know what you guys get up to in northern Indiana.
Well, it is fall time. About the only thing we have left to look forward to is Notre Dame football.
So on those ones that are hand drawn, like you say, you've got several of them. Those are just either the employer or the business does it, or you're just going in and doing those yourself. Then,
yeah, most of the time the guys are just walking around with a clipboard. They usually make a rough draft and come back, and some of them are better than others. Some of them look like a 2-year-old drawing with a crayon. Sure. Some guys like spend time in Word. The problem, if you have a good floor plan, it really makes a huge difference.
Sure.
And guys, after a while of understanding that, guys at the beginning were just doing them to do them. If they didn't have a copy, they didn't want to spend time drawing. But now they figured out that, when they have a good drawing, and we have everything color coded. It's supposed to be, different colors or different highlights for different things, different utilities. And they've figured out over the years that doing a proper one is more beneficial. Spending 20, 30 minutes drawing it versus doing 2 minutes works out better for the future.
And currently, other users are getting all of these via sync. So
correct.
When you make an update, it's getting synchronized. Just as a heads up to everybody, you can sync data like this, but as you do, the more of it that's out there, the longer a synchronization can take. If somebody doesn't have, if somebody were to be added to that group and not have any of this information, that sync can take a very long time to download all of this. That's where, and this is another area where the Think library that Eric was talking about earlier can be very beneficial, where it's server-based rather than having to deal with getting all that data local and so on. Have you run into any hiccups in trying to get this information from a business or a school who's not willing to share it? Have you been able to work around that, or is it just a matter of waiting for the right person to get in place to get it to you?
So we every once in a while we'll run into a business that doesn't necessarily understand what we're doing, and we tell them when we go, it's not an inspection. That's what most people are worried about. You're going to come in, you're going to shut us down. And we tell them it's not about that. Now, we do have an inspection department that will do that.
Sure.
But we are just coming as, and we got to sell it that we're just coming in, the guys that are going to respond to the call. If there's an emergency here after, dark, we need this information to know who to contact, where stuff is for us to be safe.
Mm-hmm.
Every once in a while, we run into a business that will basically refuse. And the way we get around that is, I don't know what the laws are in Illinois, but in Indiana, the fire inspector basically can give a business 10 days notice, and they're coming in regardless. So what we do is, with that business that refused, we basically contacted our fire inspector. He said, okay, well, we'll do a joint inspection / pre-plan at that business on this date. He sent them a formal letter, and we made it happen. So there's ways, yeah, there's ways around it.
Finally, I wanted to talk about a layer that you've got in here. So the county has a full center lines and address layer, and the cities also maintain a lot of that. But I think some of you may have noticed there's a Goshen Fire Department roads layer and a Goshen Fire Department addresses layer. What was the genesis of these? Why did you need to build these layers?
So what we've had over the years is we have a GIS coordinator for the county, and he does a phenomenal job. He does a great job. However, sometimes the way he enters addresses are not necessarily the way that we get dispatched to them. For instance, it usually happens in like mobile home parks. Mm-hmm. So mobile home parks, he may have the address as 1906 Rock Lane, for instance. Well, that's not necessarily how we get dispatched. We get dispatched by, the 4-digit number 1906 Twin Pines. So everything in that whole complex is referred to as Twin Pines. So it was just a change that we needed to make on some addresses to help us benefit our guys and how to respond. Mm-hmm. The other thing behind it, too, is when we get new roads and new addresses, he doesn't always get them in such a timely manner. Sure. And so what I will do is I will basically go in when I'm on an email list from Goshen Engineering Department. They send me all new address assignments. I go in, I will add them to the map, and then when I see that he does, I will remove mine. That way, in the meantime, because it always happens, when they just create a new address and then they have an emergency there. Maybe it's the construction workers at that site. And if those guys don't know where they're going, especially if it's a new road with a new address, they sure. might be clueless on where they're going. So it's just a way for us to put addresses in and roads in temporarily until he can get them in.
Along those same lines, just for you guys, especially in northern Illinois, I know LaSalle County already has this, and I think it's starting to spread out, where windmills are going in. Those wind farms can be huge, and especially when they're under construction, you have to have a means of being able to locate where work is going on, because there could be an on-site injury. How do you respond to that? How do you find something in the middle of nowhere? In the case of LaSalle, in fact, I'll just jump back and open that one up real fast to kind of show you guys for reference what that looks like. I love opening a huge map. There it goes. There are, under my public safety stuff here, go up just a little, maybe I put those, there we go, I put them in actually their own category, windmill sites. There's several showing out here. If I just turn them all on for a second, it'll show you on the map down here in the corner where all of those are. So when it's available, these are all just the windmill sites. And if I zoom in and the aerials come on, it gives you the location of those, and they have been addressed. They've actually got addresses set on them so that there's a location on the map that can be identified by a unique address. Usually, of course, they're going to be calling from a cell phone, so that doesn't really matter, but it at least gives you an idea of which specific windmill site they're at, and you can get an idea of how to get there. If access roads, however, are available, let me jump out to where my aerials aren't coming on, like this, then it's even more beneficial. In this case, the engineering company that was doing this work was able to provide that data. This is a newer set of photography as well, so I can actually see that in there. Often, though, that's not the case. You're using an older aerial photography set, and you're having things like this go in, and you don't have any indication of how to reach those. This has those access roads drawn in for reference then. That's kind of along the same lines, where if this information isn't being supplied, there is a means of getting it manually added to be able to have it out there for you. I know in northern Indiana and northern Illinois both, these kinds of sites are growing exponentially. There's a lot of money in it, and there's a lot of open space that gets a lot of heavy winds. So these things are going in left and right. And for public safety, that's a bit of a nightmare when you're having to respond to these things. Shane, was there anything else you wanted to talk about before we check for any questions?
Well, we talked, I believe, at the Indiana conference about the railroad buffers layers.
Yes.
If you want to just talk briefly, if you want to pull one of those up.
Sure.
So what we've done is, with the 140 trains a day that come through Goshen, the emergency response guidebook, which is basically for hazmat, and we carry it, it has to be in every apparatus. What I did is I drew these different layers here, and you can see 7,500 feet, and those are the common evacuation distances from the ERG guidebook. And what I did is I just took those off the center line of the railroad. So if we have an incident and we figure out that it's maybe chlorine in a tanker, we look up in the ERG, we see the common distance, we just go up and we flip on that layer, and it tells us basically, it gives us a general guide of how far we need to evacuate.
Right.
It's not exact, it's not taking into consideration wind speed and direction and all that, but it's better than guesstimating, because over the years, when we have had hazmat incidents, I come in and usually a couple of days later I hear about it if I'm not on shift, and I ask them, I said, well, did you evacuate far enough? And I teach them how to do that in GIS by using the lookup and drawing an area, and usually we are very underestimated on our evacuation distances.
Sure. And with these, too, you can do lookups within those. For those of you out there watching this, I can go to my lookup list features within an area. I can select a bounding feature and say, you know, because these are catch-alls, this is going to get more addresses than I need. But just to kind of give you an idea, so I'll do the 250-foot buffer. I select that, and then I'll look on my addresses layer. There we go. And what that's going to do then is kick out all the addresses that are within that 100-foot buffer. And I can then use this as a reference for, okay, these are all the places we need to go to. I can kick it out to an Excel spreadsheet if I need, and so on. Like I say, that's going to catch anything within that 100-foot buffer, which actually covers a lot of area. So what Shane was referencing was, let me turn all of these off except for that 250 now. If there's a spill here and we need to look at that 250-foot buffer, but as also the distance each direction along the track we need to go, I can go up to my lookup list features within an area and draw a boundary. And what this allows me to do, I'll look up the addresses again, is just draw in along this buffer that's already on there and say, okay, it's, you know, down here to Lincoln Avenue, and then back up along that buffer again. It only takes a couple seconds to really do this. That when I right-click, now I'm showing a more reasonable amount and probably more accurate the number of addresses and their locations that I need to go and evacuate. Eric, how we doing? We got any questions floating around out there? Did everybody fall asleep?
Well, no questions right now. You guys have just explained everything so thoroughly and perfectly.
Okay.
But we do have a couple minutes. We can take questions if anybody has any.
I just want to add, that pre-plan layer that I've made is actually, I believe it's in the library. Is that correct, Dylan, for the template library?
Yes.
So it's something that, obviously you can take that template that I've made and make it your own. If that's something that you want to do, you can pass that on to your local fire department. And if you add that one, Dylan, that one might not be the tabbed out one. I probably need to get you guys the tabbed out one.
I can actually grab it from here probably and get it out there.
So, but yeah, that information's out there. I'm more than willing to share that information. I just want to see people use it.
No, it's
there you go.
We're good.
So, and I would always encourage, if you're going to do something like this, I go to fire departments all the time, and they're like, we don't want all, we don't need or want all that information. We're a volunteer fire department. We don't need it. And that's fine. I encourage you to make it your own. If you spend a little time and you format it and you make it your own, it's going to be more beneficial to your guys. You're going to get more buy-in feedback. It does help. ISO comes in. ISO is basically who gives you your fire department, your insurance ratings. And every year they have to come in and do an inspection of your fire department. We got outstanding reviews. I showed them ThinkGIS, how we do our pre-plans, and they rant and raved about it, about our system and how we're leaps and bounds above most other departments by using the system we are. So it does get you extra points for ISO rating, which can ultimately bring down insurance rates and bring more industry to your area or more houses, because especially industry, they look at that stuff. If it's between going to Elkhart City or Goshen City and we have a lower rating, they're going to come here. So.
We hope you found this training session beneficial and to your liking. If you have further questions, please contact us at 888-225-5984 or email us at support@wthgis.com.